Okay, Sydney, I'm going to walk you through making the pie crust first. What I have here is I have my Crisco and salt, flour, the water, the vinegar, and the eggs. And so what I do is I just mix the flour and the salt together first, and I usually use kind of a whisk. That kind of helps fluff up the flour a little bit, kind of like what a sifter would do. Okay, so that's all mixed in. And then what I'm going to add next is the Crisco, and I will get that in there. You just dump it in there. And then this is a handy dandy Pampered Chef item that just, you can push out the Crisco, which is kind of nice. And then you're going to cut this together. And I use a pie cutter like this. That seems to work best. And so then you just start to cut it into the flour and the salt that I've already mixed in there. And it takes a little while. You just keep cutting it in until the Crisco and the flour are mixed well. This will take a minute, and then you'll see that I already have in the measuring cup there, I've already put my eggs in there and my cold water and my vinegar, and I just mixed that together. So when I get the flour and the Crisco cut, then I will add that liquid mixture to the pie crust. Still too big of chunks of Crisco, so I'm going to continue to cut. This is exactly why these pie cutters that are strong and not flimsy are kind of essential when you're making your pie crust. I have before, like if I'm at somebody's house and they don't have a pie cutter, I have done it with a fork, but it's time consuming and difficult to get it mixed properly. It's almost ready. I just want to make sure that all of the flour has kind of been cut into the Crisco. Or the Crisco has been cut into the flour, however you want to say it. Okay. Let me make sure that there's no big chunks there. All right. Looks like I am now ready to add the eggs. I doubled the recipe, so that's why there's 2 eggs in here, and there's 10 tablespoons of cold water and 2 teaspoons of vinegar. I'm just going to kind of pour that around. And then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to cut it again. And this time when I'm cutting the liquid into the flour mixture and Crisco mixture, I'm going to try not to over mix it or over cut it. I just want it to be mixed just enough. If you mix it way too much, it'll make your pie crust tough. But again, you have to make sure that there's no dry flour mixture in there. You have to make sure that you do cut it all together. And it's almost ready. Just about. Okay, I think that's good. Now, this pie crust is going to be pretty sticky, and that's okay. That's what makes it really fluffy or flaky. So you don't want a real dry mix right now. So it does, as you can see, it sticks to my finger still, but not bad. If you poke it with your finger, you know, no dough will come up. So I'm going to wash my hands real quick. Again. And now this next step, Sydney, this is what either makes or breaks you making a pie crust. So let me clear these things out there and wipe off my counter. And I'm going to show you the best way that I have found to make a pie crust without having to add a whole lot of flour to it in rolling it out. The first thing I want you to do is I want you to wetten your counter, just like this. I want you to wetten it really well. So just make it really wet. And then I want you to take a clean flour sack dish towel. These are the ones that like your Grandma Jan embroidered on. I want you to take a flour sack dish towel and I want you to lay it out on that wet. And you'll notice that it's just a nice surface now to roll your pie crust on. Sorry, I had to get my rolling pin. Then what I want you to do is just sprinkle some flour on the tea towel. This is so much better than like rolling it out on wax paper. This is just the best way that I have found to do it. Then I want you to put a little extra flour kind of up in the corner, because what we're going to do is we're going to take a chunk of the pie crust. It would probably be about the size of, let's say, if you were making 2 hamburgers. That's about how much. So you can see that's about the size. And then what I want you to do is I want you to pat it out like you would if you were making a hamburger patty. And be careful to kind of keep the edges from cracking like that. I want you to really pat it so that it has a nice clean edge on it. That will prevent it opening up and cracking while you're rolling it out. It'll still crack a little bit, but nothing like it would if you didn't take the time to do this. Now this little extra flour in the corner, I just want you to pat it down, pat it around again, maybe a little bit more. I just want you to make sure that you have plenty of flour on it so it's not going to stick when we start rolling out the pie crust. And then again, just kind of use your hands to make it into a nice round flat surface like a pumpkin. Go ahead and put some flour on your roller. This roller is a little bit different than my wooden roller, so it doesn't work as well, but for some reason I don't have my wooden roller anymore. I don't know if it disappeared at college or if I lost it. I have no idea. And then just, yeah, I have a littler roller. I'm going to use it. I do have an old small rolling pin from my grandmother. This is going to work better. I don't like the bigger roller. And then just roll it out. And if you need to just sprinkle a little bit of flour on the top of your pie crust just to keep it from sticking, go ahead and do so. Just roll this out. If your towel starts to move too much, you can kind of sneak some water underneath it again to make it wet, because then that makes the tea towel, that makes the pie crust stick to the tea towel. And you want to kind of get this pretty thin. Make sure there's no wrinkles under this. You like a pretty thin pie crust. See how along the edges there's a few cracks there? They're going to be fine because they're not going to, I'm not going to need that edge. I'm making the pie crust big enough that it's gonna cover the pie pan just fine. Okay. And then a little trick that I do, because what we're gonna do now is we're gonna be folding this pie crust in half. I'm gonna fold it toward me. But before I do that, I'm gonna take a pizza cutter and I'm gonna go around all these edges where there's little slits, and I'm gonna make sure I cut all those little slits out, because otherwise the pie crust is likely to crack in those areas. But if you have a nice round pie crust to start with, you're not going to have that problem when you fold it and when you put it into your pan. So now we have a nice round pie crust, and we're just going to very carefully, we're going to fold it over like that. Just flip it over. You kind of have to just bring it up with your fingers and let go of it to flip it. Then you get your pie pan, and then you just very gently put it in your pie pan, just like this. And then you're going to open it up, and there again, you just kind of have to barely grab it with your fingers and flip it. And then what you're going to do is just very gently lift up the edges of your pie pan there and make sure that it's all the way in like that. There's a little wrinkle there, but that's okay. It doesn't matter. I just want to make sure I have enough pie crust, because if you stretch the pie dough and it's not sitting nice into your pie pan, then your pie crust is going to shrink around the edges. And so then your fluted edges are going to actually end up kind of in the pie. So there we go. You can kind of see that I have the pie crust ready. And then I'm just going to take a sharp knife. Some people just cut right along the edge. I don't do that, just because I know that I roll my pie dough pretty thin, so it's not like I'm going to have a real thick fluted edge when I get done. So I always put my finger under here and I cut it a little bit longer than the edge of the pie pan. And I'll show you why I do that in just a minute. So I just cut it like this. Just like that. I just kind of put my hand underneath it. I don't get in a hurry because I don't want to tear it. And I just kind of cut along. Just bring my finger around, and so I'm just probably leaving maybe a 1/4 to a 1/2 inch, probably more like a 1/4 of an inch, just like that. So then here's your scraps again. And then what I'm going to do is, this is what I like to do, I then take this edge and I just barely fold it so that it's even with the glass dish. I just fold it like that. Fold it under. I'm hoping you can see this. Fold it under all the way around. And again, you have to be really gentle with it so that it doesn't tear. Almost all the way around. This just, by folding this under like this, this just makes a really nice fluted edge. Then what I do is I just kind of press it down just a little bit. I don't want it to stick to the edge of the pan, but I just want to press it down just a little bit so I have a little bit more to work with. Then you're just going to take your thumb and your index finger, and your other index finger will kind of lay flat. And then I just stick my thumb in there and then push down. Thumb, push down, thumb. Just like that. And see how pretty that makes the edge. Again, your finger and your thumb, and then I just do that. I just barely push it in with my thumb, and I hold it with my index finger. I go all the way around, just like that. Keep going around. It'll probably take you a little bit longer to do this, but I've done it so many times. It really doesn't take me very long to do it. All right, so there you have your fluted edge that looks really nice. And then you're ready to put your pumpkin in or anything for a one crust pie. I'll make you another video that will show you how to make a two crust pie. With that, I will stop recording.